I landed in Denver less than 12 hours after I buried my wife in Seoul. I texted the family group chat, "Flight lands at 5. Can someone pick me up?" My brother replied, "We're busy. Try Uber." My mom wrote, "Why didn't you plan better?" My dad reacted with a thumbs up. I typed, "No worries," because that's what I always did. In the terminal, I watched strangers hug their people while I dragged 3 suitcases alone. My phone stayed silent. That night, those same words ended up on the local news. My family had one priority my whole life, my brother. I was the one who stayed convenient. My wife saw it fast and she hated it. Right before she moved overseas for a contract, she told me, "If anything happens, don't let anyone tell you you're asking for too much." A week later, a stranger called saying she collapsed at work. I flew to Seoul alone, sleeping in terminals and living on bad coffee. In the ICU, she was on machines, pale and still. I glanced at her chart and froze. Emergency contacts. Me and her old professor back in Texas, not my parents or my brother. She'd already decided who was safe. When I called my mom, she asked about insurance. My brother talked about costs. Nobody asked if I had eaten or slept. 3 days later, I signed the papers to let her go. At the funeral, I set up a video call. My mom complained and left early. My brother said he had a client meeting. I buried my wife with coworkers and silence. Colorado was in a historic freeze when I got back. Before I left, my mom promised she'd turn the heat on before I returned. My brother promised he'd stock the fridge. I opened my front door to darkness and air so cold it burned. The thermostat was dead. The fridge was empty except expired junk. I passed out on the couch in my coat, too wrecked to unpack her things. I woke up to water. Pipes had burst in the ceiling and the house was flooding while my breath fogged. Every plumber said, "Days." I called my brother and asked to stay with him. "We've got a client dinner," he said. "Get a motel." I called my mom. "Bridge club tomorrow," she said. "Don't be dramatic." I sloshed into the basement to shut off circuits before the lights sparked. The stairs were slick. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. Then my foot slid on cold water. Next, my shoulder slammed into the metal panel. Then the current shot up my arm. Next, my chest locked and the room tilted. Again, I tried to crawl and my fingers went numb. Then the CO alarm started screaming somewhere behind me. Next, the dark swallowed everything whole. I learned later my neighbor saw water pouring under my door and called 911. Firefighters broke in and found me unconscious, hypothermic, and full of carbon monoxide. One of them grabbed my phone. The screen still showed our chat, glowing like a punch. At the hospital, a nurse asked, "Anyone nearby to help you?" She wrote something down and I saw the words, "Limited family support." A reporter ran my case that night as a storm injury segment. No names, but the texts were on TV. By midnight, my family rushed into my room with a convenience store bouquet and wide eyes. My mom said, "That report made us look terrible. People are misunderstanding." The doctor explained. I couldn't be alone for 48 hours, and suddenly they rearranged schedules. A social worker offered options. A hotel, neighbors rotating check-ins, a restoration crew for my house. My mom snapped, "He doesn't need strangers." The social worker asked, "Did he have you?" Nobody answered. I heard my wife's voice like a warning bell. "Don't let anyone tell you you're asking for too much." So I looked at them and said, "I'm taking the hotel." My mom stiffened. "You're embarrassing us." I said, "I nearly died alone in my house. That embarrassment isn't mine." Strangers showed up with soup. Neighbors checked on me. The restoration team fixed the damage and winter-proofed the place. My family sent stiff texts afterward, like the news was the problem. Months later, I put a small scholarship in my wife's name. My dad wrote me a letter that didn't make excuses. He admitted he'd been absent, even when I was right in front of him. We met for coffee on neutral ground, and I set boundaries he respected. My mom and brother stayed polite and distant. I stopped chasing them. I stopped shrinking. A year later, I went back to Seoul and sat by her grave. I didn't lose my family that winter. I finally saw them, and I stopped saying no worries when I was the one paying the price.